Now we're going to look at another mismatch game between world champion Magnus Carlsen and an expert rated 2027. And I'll be pointing out about 6 things that you can come away with and use in all of your games. And on move 21, we'll see an important decision-making idea. Okay, so the world champ opens with knight to f3, hitting the center squares, you know all that stuff. Knight to f6, and Magnus plays c4. When white plays c4 or black plays c5, they're hoping to trade off their less valuable c-pawn for their opponent's more valuable d-pawn. It also prepares for the opening of the c-file and activity along that file, especially by the rooks. And here c4 is preventing black from establishing a pawn on d5, one of the 4 key central squares. Black continues with g6, knight to c3, and black plays d5, and we have an exchange on the d5 square. And now g3, bishop fianchettos, and the white bishop fianchettos. We have castle, black castles. And now Magnus makes the first aggressive move with h4, the first threat to enter enemy territory and to disrupt black's kingside pawn structure. And at this point, I'm sure the expert is out of his book and has to think for himself, which means he has the chance to make a suboptimal move. What would you do? Would you stop this pawn from pushing forward by playing h5? Would you play h6? Would you develop a piece? They're probably all reasonable moves. The expert chooses to develop his knight to c6. He's telling Carlsen, I ain't afraid of your h5 push. So Carlsen obliges and plays h5. Knight takes, pawn takes towards the center, which is what you usually should do, all things being equal. There are exceptions to all rules. And here it makes sense for another reason as well. If he took with this pawn, then the queen could take queen and king takes, and white would no longer have the option of castling. And black plays e5 with a little threat of playing e4, chasing the knight. And now Carlsen makes a cool move to defend that e4 push by playing queen to a4. Black follows with rook to e8 to continue that threat of pushing. The pawn takes, little in-between move. Pawn recaptures. Now the queen slides over, threatening check along the h-file. Maybe checkmate, bringing the knight in. So black captures and rook captures. So white isn't going to castle, but the center is difficult to open here, so it's probably not going to be a problem for white. And now we have a complicated middle game, just what the better player wants against a weaker opponent. Both sides still need to develop their queenside pieces. They both have some nice center influence, but in the broadest scheme of things, we see that white has a pawn majority actually through the center, 5 here against 4. Pawn to e4 is a forcing move, and bishop attacking the rook is a very forcing move. Little guy harassing big guy. Chess really is about piece mobility and activity. So let's look at pieces and pawns that might be a little immobile or undefended. I don't see any undefended pieces in the white camp. Do you see any in the black camp? Pause the video. Did you notice this undefended c7 pawn? It looks like Magnus did, because after his opponent attacked his rook, he moved to c4, x-raying this pawn through the knight, and it also coordinates with this bishop on g2 on this c6 square. A very nice grandmasterly move. Although I'd be afraid of having my rook exposed here with all these little guys around and being able to attack it with bishop here, pawn here at some point. But I guess Carlsen has it all worked out. Black plays a6, so it looks like he is going after this rook at some point. And the knight plays to h2. Every time your opponent moves, you always have to ask, what is the threat? So do you see Carlsen's threat here? Pause the video. He could win a pawn with bishop takes, pawn takes, rook takes, or he could actually do it the other way, rook takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, attacking both undefended rooks. So black defends the knight with the bishop, and now white plays knight to g4, attacking the undefended bishop. Black could capture the knight, and then the rook could recapture, and that would give white the bishop pair, which tends to be an advantage in open positions. In the middle game, that's a very common strategy, is to try to get the bishop pair. Black doesn't go for that and runs to g7, and now white remaneuvers his knight with a little 1-2 action, knight to e3, with the threat of coming to d5, attacking this undefended pawn. The rook preempts that and plays to c8, defending the pawn in advance, and the knight comes in anyway. Now black is feeling the heat and loosens his position a little bit by playing b5, attacking the rook. The rook runs to c5. Now I'd be worried about this, still worried about getting my rook trapped. But you see, if he comes here, the knight could check the king. There'd be 2 attackers on this knight here. And after this check, the knight would be able to capture this bishop. So he'd probably win a piece here. Let's see, bishop here, attacking the rook. Check. King runs. Knight takes bishop, defending the rook. Yeah, he'd be up a piece. Now black plays e4, opening up this long diagonal for the bishop, and cuts off the communication of this bishop on g2. But white has managed to maintain the initiative and keep black tied down to defense, defending this pawn here. And now white launches a move that I call pawn shredding by playing a4, attacking this pawn, threatening to open up this rook. Sometimes this move is called a pawn break, but I make a distinction between pawn shredding and pawn breaks, where pawn shredding creates more weak pawns. This is also an example of the fighting principle of fighting from where you're at. This rook has not moved, and yet now it's going to become a very powerful piece. So black doesn't want to open that rook up and plays b4, which can also hit away at this c3 pawn, making this bishop more powerful. So the rook gets out of that pin. And now has a threat on the b4 pawn. 3 attackers and 1 defender. And black plays a5, giving him the option of recapturing with the knight should white decide to capture on b4. It's not real clear to me right now how that will transpire. This undefended pawn is being x-rayed. If he takes and knight takes, pawn takes, rook takes, then these rooks would be skewered. Anyway, there's some tactics there. So a5 allows white to go wrong, and that's something you should always be looking at too when you're looking through combinations. And any move, actually, try and come up with moves that further your plan but also allows your opponent to make a suboptimal move. But Carlsen doesn't go for any of these complications and plays bishop to b2, developing his final piece, which also threatens to trade off black's most active piece. His bishop here on g7 is his best piece. And that's another strategy you look for in middle games, where you try to trade off your opponent's best piece. This rook is hitting his own pawn. This rook is own pawn here, tied to defense. And this bishop is tied to defense as well. Black plays pawn takes. He recaptures with the bishop. Bishop takes and knight takes. Now we've got 2 attackers on this pawn. And black plays f5, defending it. What move would you make as white here? Pause the video. And now we see another instance of pawn shredding. Carlsen plays d3. Notice that the bishop is x-raying the knight, which is attacked once. And if this pawn takes, the bishop could capture the knight and win a piece. And if he doesn't take, white can win a pawn here by playing pawn takes. Pawn takes, he still has 2 attackers on the e4 square. So the house of cards is about to fall. Black goes to get rid of one of the attackers by challenging the rook, the undefended rook. Rook takes, knight takes, pawn takes, and white has won a pawn. But wait, there's this undefended pawn here. The bishop takes it, but now the rook attacks the undefended bishop and gets the pawn back with tempo, attacking this undefended knight. And now black has these 2 very weak pawns, and with good play, white should win. I guess the black player was under time pressure because he completely blunders. The king played to g7, leaving this undefended knight. The rook captures the knight, and black resigns. So what strategic ideas did the world champ employ that we can use in our games too? 1. Target immobile pawns or pieces, or the base of a pawn chain. Tie your opponent down to defense. 2. Centralize your pieces, as Carlsen did with the rook, but for a specific purpose. Don't mindlessly follow principles. 3. Try to get the bishop pair. 4. Look for pawn shredding opportunities. This is a common maneuver in Grandmaster games. 5. Open lines and diagonals to make your rooks and bishops more active. Be efficient and fight from where you're at, if possible. And 6. Trade your opponent's best piece. Quite often all you need is just one strategic advantage to win a game. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff, it really helps. And leave a comment or question. Thanks a lot.